Hello, this is Christian. Welcome to Angular. In this video, I'm going to show you how to fetch data over the HTTP protocol using Angular's built-in HTTP client and this library called RXJS. So here is a scenario where we might want to fetch data from a remote server. On the right side here, this green box over here is where we are going to fetch data from using the popular, HTTP request types get, post, put, and delete. And so to communicate with the server, Angular has to use these AJAX calls, right, or asynchronous call that would fetch or form that connection between that server. And so using the a new HTTP client, now in Angular 9, it's called HTTP client. Now in the previous versions, I think just called HTTP. Okay, but it's using XML HTTP request, which is AJAX calls. So you do have some restrictions because with AJAX, you are restricted to the same domain. So if you are fetching data across a different domain or different server, you need to make sure that that server allows cross-domain access. Okay. So once that connection's been made, then we can create a service, inject the service to this component here, and through this DI injection or dependency injection system. And once this component has injected that service, then it can consume that service by subscribing to its services, right? And so you would use that through use this RxJS library, which is a reactive extensions for JavaScript library, just a library that enhances the management of asynchronous calls. Okay, so we will use this with Angular. I'm not going to create any, observers and things like that. We'll just use the library to help fetch and manage these data for us automatically. Okay, so and what it will return is an observable, right? Observable of a certain data type. So it could be, in this case, it would be just a data source. It could be a JSON data type, JSON data, or anything you want, like functions or any other things you need. Okay. And then once that's done, then of course this service is a singleton, so that means it can be shared across all these different components as well. Right, so let's go and take a look at one more thing I want to show you before we do the code. Oh, so here is the RxJS website if you are interested in learning more about it. It is a library that that allows you to compose or create synchronous and callback code. Okay, so really useful. They have a really nice some examples in here how they work and how the observer pattern works and things like that. So if you're not familiar with it, I would highly encourage you to, visit the site here and learn some things about this observer stuff. Okay, so for us, we are going to use this app we built in a separate video, and I'm gonna just basically, I already actually, built this table here, not the entire data, but just the table structure. And for our delete and edit operations, as well as the add flight and the edit. Okay, so we're gonna perform those using CRUD operations. And this app here, we just basically pull data from a local file, which is another object. So this is not what we're going to do this time. We're going to fetch data from remote server. Okay, so we can do that asynchronously. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. All right, so and this is the app that we're going to modify. And so I'm going to just basically add another navigation here to go to a different section or a different feature. And in that section, maybe something like flights. Yeah, I'm going to call it flights here, like this. And then the flights, I'll have a button, and then to show and the flight information and its own internal route, or we call these the child routes. Okay, so also see how I show how that's done. Okay, so I'll leave this here. Well, let's go back to the home page here. Okay, so let's go and set it up. So here is the app that I have. Oh, let me just close this first. Let me close all of these first so we're not too confusing. So the first thing is I want to go and create the navigation first. I have this already. So again, the forms are all set up, and I'll show you what it looks like when we set up the navigation. So go here. No, not this one. Over here. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to add a new one right at the end here. And this will be just called flights. This is a new feature, and we call it flights. Okay, so that's it for this one. And now we need to fix the route. So I have to go to the app routing module, and we need to create a 2 or 3 child routes in here. So I'm going to duplicate that, and then this will be flights. This is the main route, and then it's going to have children. So here, before we end it, you put a comma here, and then right down here, there is a property called children right here. Okay, and then their child routes are kind of similar to what you see here. I mean, it's just a list of routes again. Right? It's the same pattern here. So the first route is it's going to be let's say we want to call it show. This is going to be show, and I'm going to show the list of flights. So this will be the component of flight list. Okay, you want to use that to show in the router. And then the second one, it's kind of hard to see. Let's do it this way. And then the second one is going to be when we add a new, list, a new item. This will be the flight add component. And then you have one more for the edit. So when we do edit, we're going to go to the edit / with an ID, just like our user up here, right? We need to fetch the ID. And then this component will be the flight edit. Okay, so let's import this first. Okay, so these are the child routes under the flights. So that means we navigate to the /flights. If I do /show, /add, /edit, and those will have its own route shown under its own section. Okay, so not directly from the home page, but from under its flights. So that's how you build the routes here. All right, so that's done. And then once that's done, then that's why if you go to the, and also I created the flights information here under a new folder called flights. So let me just collapse these. So under the flights, this is the main component. So this is like the parent component, kind of like the app component here. And then the HTML page here, I added 2 buttons to show flights and add flights, and they link to the show and the add here. Okay, and then you can see here I have a router outlet here. So the child out, another router inside this component. So this is the child router here. And so when I click these 2 buttons, it's going to show the data right here instead of going to the home page. All right. So let's save this, and let's go and see what it looks like in the browser now. Okay, so here's the flight over here, and it doesn't work yet. Let me close this now. Let me see, maybe refresh it maybe. Let's try again. All right, yeah, the didn't show the information here. It should show the 2 buttons here. So let's take a look. I might have a typo somewhere usually, otherwise it would have thrown error. So let's see, maybe the route section here. Yeah, I'm calling the wrong route component. It should be the flights component here. That's why. And we will import it. Okay, so let's see if this resolves that issue. And here we go. So already here. So if I go again here, click on flights. Now I see 2 buttons here. If I click show flight, you see this is the form that is in the edit, the list. Okay, so we're going to go and populate the data here as soon as we fetch data from the server. And app flight here has the form already, so we're going to do that as well. And the edit is it's not shown here, but basically when you click the buttons over here, the 2 buttons over here, with the edit, right, it's going to go into a link here with say edit and then with the ID of whatever the ID is. Okay, it's going to load that. As you can see, the form will look just like the add form. Okay, so let's go and set up the service. Now we're going to do the CRUD operations in the separate videos, but for now I just want to set up the service and make the connection to the app and so on. But before I do that though, I want to make sure that the app is running, and that means I'm going to have to launch my other application. So this is the Django application here, And I'll be running this in a little while to show where the data is coming from. But Django, I think, uses port number um, in this app. I'm using a port number 8000. I'm not sure if that's, I don't remember if that's default port or not, but that would be the port number. Okay, I'll run in a different video. Okay, so this is done. We're good with this, and we're good with this here. So let's go. And the first thing we need to do is create our service, right? So here in the service folder, I have the users. So we're not going to use this way. So as you can see, it's kind of very similar. I could just copy this or generate another one. So it's already here. So why not? I'll just copy this, and you know what? I'll show you how to do it in using the command tool. Okay, so you know how to do it. So let's go to the terminal here and create another tab. Go to my app. Okay, so you generate service, kind of same thing you do with components and modules. The shortcut will be ng for G for generate, and then S is for service. Okay, and the name of the service is going to be inside the services. And if the folder exists, it will use that. If it doesn't, it will create a new one. And so I'm going to call it just flight, and I don't want the test. I think that's all we need. If it's not, we'll just make some modifications manually. So that's done. And so going here, you see that now we have the flight service. Okay, so already built for us. Now I'm going to go into the models and create a model kind of similar to this interface here. This is the interface for the iUser. But I'm going to create a class so that we can instantiate a class to hold our data. And so I'm going to create a new file here. I'll call it just flight TS. And let me grab the actual data record so we can have those fields. I have another file here. So our class is going to have these data fields. Okay, I'll just leave it here so I can see. And so I'm going to say export class call, let's call it flight. And then the fields are ID of type number. Number, the airline, string, and then the rest will be strings. Just gonna, they're all strings. And you can put this date, but I think string should be fine. And flight number will be a string as well. Trip type. And departure, airport. I'll just duplicate this. It's kind of similar. This is the arrival airport. This is the departure time or date. And this is the return date. Okay, so that is my class and my template, right? So I will use that to generate objects. So I'm good with that now. And so now I need to import that into this service right here so I can use it, right? That means, well, the first thing you want to do is you need to get the HTTP client. And before we do that, make sure that you have included in the add modules here, you have to include this module called HTTP client module in order for Angular to use its HTTP client to access remote servers. Okay, so make sure that it's installed or imported at the root module and include that in the import like you see down here. Okay, and that's good to go. And then in here in the service, then we need to import the HTTP client, and we're going to inject that into this constructor. Okay, so I can just do here, and it will import automatically. And I'll have a variable called a HTTP. I just call it that. You can call whatever you want. And this will be the HTTP client. Okay, you're going to import that there, as you can see already. Now again, in the older version of Angular, it's actually inside the Angular /HTTP, but I think Angular 9, they changed that to be part of the common now, and also changed the name to say HTTP client. Before we just say HTTP. Okay, so if you're an older version, just make sure that it matches the correct type. And any future videos, I don't know, I mean, in future versions I might change that too, but for now it's Angular 9. So I got that in here, and then now I need to create the services, right? those services will be like, you fetch data, get, put, delete, update, and so on. Now, the first thing we need to do is, any AJAX calls, you need the URL to get the data from. Where is that URL endpoint? It's going to go, the main URL. And so I'm going to put like right here, I just call it endpoint or URL, however you want to call it. It's going to be going to the HTTP 127.0.0.1. That's one that use for that, localhost. So make sure you use that IP address and not localhost. If you do this, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because if you're using a different, the machine can interpret it differently. So it's always safe to use the IP address if you're using localhost. Okay, every remote site it'll be different, but localhost, just use that local IP address. And I use port 8000 for Django, and then the flights. And last thing you want to do is put a slash here, right? It's really important to put a slash. This trailing slash will cause an error if you don't include it, and usually we have issue things with the course issues if you don't include this slash here. Also, because I'm serving from a different server, a different site, then you want to make sure that your application, your server over there allows set up cores to allow access from remotely. So I already set that up, so that's already good to go, I think. Okay, so that's the endpoint. And then now we need to create those operations. So here we do a get all flights. So through this HTTP, okay, you have all those functions: get, put, delete, update. Okay, so the first one is going to be get all. So I would say this.http .get, get. Okay, it's a function, and then this function is going to return a flight information. Okay, so we're going to get all of them. Okay, so this is the function to get that. So you can't just call like that, right? I have to put it inside a function. So I would say this is for get all, get flights. We'll just put plural here. So it's going to return a type of observable, because we'll let the RXJS, as you can see, it import automatically for us. It's going to do the asynchronous call and manage all that for us automatically. And this observable, you have to pass in a generic type. Okay, so here it has to be either whatever you want, like strings and numbers and all those data types, or another object. So for us, usually we would say I want to have the flight type, right? And as you can see, we import the flight model class from there. So you can say, well, it's going to all of them. So it's a list of flights. You can do that if you want, but this is kind of risky, because if your data fails, then what's coming back is really not a flight, right? So if you know for sure that it's not going to fail, yeah, that's fine. But it's always a chance that this might fail. So in this case, it's always safe to put any here, any type. So you can also receive error messages. And then now you can put the curlies here, and I'll close the curlies down here. And then this inside here is where I make the call. Okay, I made the call right here. And for this function, it takes a couple of parameters. The first one is the URL, the endpoint. Okay, and then the second is, and this for the get, I think it's like the header options, like what type of header you want and things like that. So we're not going to worry about the headers here. We're just concerned about the endpoint. So for the get, we just go directly to this endpoint. So it'll be just this endpoint, exactly like that. And then let's see, observable any, what's going on here? Okay. It's either void or must return a value. Yeah, so we're gonna return this part here. That's what I'm saying. Keep forgetting. We make this a strict type, right? Strict type. If you put a colon after the function, you have to return something. If you put anything else other than void, so going back to your strictly typed language syntax, like Java, right? Okay, so we're gonna return this observable back. Okay. of that type, whatever that is. If it's a string, we get a string. If it's a number, we get a number, usually a string. If it's JSON text, we get JSON, and so on. Okay, so we get that, and that's pretty simple. So we do something similar for the next one. I'll just copy this. Control Shift down arrow. This is for the get a single one, and then this is just get one. I just put one for now. Okay, so get one, and you take an ID. So the ID will be a number type. You want to be restricted to a number type because our data in the actual database is number. I think. And again, the coming back it's the same. You can make it really strict if you want, but we just put any here. And so, for example, if I put like flight, it's a single flight. Notice I have an error here, right? This means this has to match as well, because it doesn't match this type, then it's a problem. So what that means is that in the get right here, you have to put the type to match that. Okay, otherwise it won't work. And again, if you don't get the flight information, which is a class of this service we saw earlier, data earlier, then that's a problem. So again, you can just leave that out, and then if you put any here, then you should be good. Okay, so it takes two things. Well, we get just not two things, but this URL plus the ID, right? So we're gonna put here plus the ID, this ID here. All right, so that's it for this one, and then actually we want to do the other one too, right? The get and delete. So let's just do that really quick. I'm going to copy this again. One for add, delete one, delete all. Okay, I think that's all we have. Just simple, those 4 CRUD operations. This is add one, so this will be add flight, and we need just the flight information, so it'll be flight, and we want this to be the type of flight. Okay, we want to be very strict on this type, and when we send that over to over here, it will be a post and not a get. We're actually going to the URL with no ID, and then second here is the payload. Okay, so you can see here's the body of the payload. So in this case, it will be just the flight information. Okay, so we got that done, and then this is for delete one. So put here delete one, and then if you delete one, you need the ID to delete, right? Match the data. And so I'm going to say here delete instead of that, and then we pass in the ID with the URL, and that's all we need. And then over here is the delete all. This is the dangerous one. So just say delete flights, make the plural, and just like the get all up there, there's no number, nothing, no ID, and we just basically just say delete and then the URL with no ID, and that just dump everything. Okay, it's important to get a URL here. These are really important endpoints because these will match whatever it is on the Django side or on the server side. So if I put just like this is a if I'm using through a get, then it's going to fetch the data. If I use the same URL like this, if I pass in a delete request, it's going to do a deletion instead on the other side. Okay, so I think that's it for this one. And so that's just how you set up your service. And then the next thing is you just basically inject that to other components and consume them and then use them.